The December morning fog shrouded Oxnard in a dense blanket, turning the silhouettes of the houses into blurs. I drove slowly down Fifth Street, looking for the right address. Plumbing inspection isn't the kind of job where you're welcomed with open arms, especially when you come to report that their system isn't up to code and will need expensive repairs. Parking at the curb, I pulled out my tablet and double-checked the data. Homeowner is Garrett Pembroke, 3 violations in the past year, 2 warnings. Today's the last inspection before the fine. I corrected the badge on my uniform jacket. Freya Hambleton, Senior Water Inspector. The very word senior still seemed foreign next to my name. I didn't order any inspection, the low man with the balding hair said, opening the door just enough to see his disgruntled face. Mr. Pembroke, this is a routine inspection. You were notified 2 weeks ago. I handed him a copy of the letter. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. He looked at me with a look that showed clear doubt about my competence. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Wouldn't it be better if you sent someone? He stammered, but I understood the end of the sentence. Someone more experienced? A man? I smiled the professional smile I'd practiced for years. I assure you, Mr. Pembroke, I am more than qualified. 7 years of experience, a degree in water resources engineering. I can show you the certificates if you'd like. He reluctantly let me inside. 34 minutes later, I was already explaining the problems with the check valve and filtration system to him, making notes on the report. If you don't fix it within 2 weeks, you'll be fined, I summarized, handing him the paperwork to sign. And please, next time don't use the garden hose to connect the dishwasher. That's a violation of at least 3 code sections. Back in the car, I felt a familiar satisfaction. I had always been confident in my work, knew what I was saying, what I was doing, understood the rules of the game. Not like with my family, where the rules were always changing and I was always the loser. There was a stack of reports waiting for me in the office and an email from my mother. The headline read, "Christmas dinner, confirm attendance." 3 exclamation points was a bad sign. I set the email aside, deciding to read it later when I was mentally ready. Hey Freya, how'd it go at Pembroke's? Zena lowered herself into the chair next to me, holding out a cup of coffee. Did he try to intimidate you with his complaints to the mayor's office again? He didn't threaten me this time, but he clearly wasn't crazy about the female inspector. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Thank you, you're my savior. Zena Atkins worked in data processing and was the only person in Oxnard I could call a friend. Short, with short red hair and freckles all over her face, she exuded an energy I'd always lacked. A letter from Mommy? She nodded at my computer screen. I could tell by the look on your face that it was. I sighed and opened the letter. As expected, my mother demanded immediate confirmation of my participation in the annual Christmas dinner. Everyone has already confirmed, just waiting for you as usual, she wrote. And then she'd add, Willow's bringing her signature apple pie. What are you making this time? Oh God, here we go again, I groaned. Every year it's the same thing. First, she'd compare my dessert to Willow's masterpiece. Then she'd ask about my non-existent love life. And then my dad would get drunk and start telling me how proud he was of his oldest daughter, an accountant who was making real money. Zena rolled her eyes. And why do you agree every time? Just say you have other plans. I can't. I leaned back in my chair. They're my family. A family that turns every holiday into a torture for you. Zena sipped her coffee. Remember last year? You came back from that and you couldn't sleep for a week. I remembered. My mom had decided to have a family talent contest then, knowing that Willow had been playing piano since she was 6, and I was a total talentless musician. When it was my turn, she said loudly, Well, Freya, show us what you've been doing all these years instead of music school. Everyone laughed, even my father. It was a long time ago, I lied. Besides, Grandma will be upset if I don't come. Your grandmother is just like the others. Zena shook her head. Remember how she commented on your new haircut? I hope they at least gave you a discount. I smiled involuntarily. Grandma Elma was a sharp-tongued woman, but at least she was equally critical of everyone, unlike my mother, whose love for Willow bordered on obsession. Look, Freya, Zena leaned closer, becoming unusually serious. I'm your friend, and it hurts me every time I see you come back from them. Broken. They won't change. They never will. Maybe it's time to accept that and take care of yourself. I knew she was right. Every time I went to a family reunion, I promised myself I wouldn't let them hurt me. And each time I came back with new scars, invisible, but painful. Little cuts that never fully healed. We'll see, I replied evasively, turning back to my reports. I have 2 more weeks to think about it. 2 weeks to get my self-respect in a fist and tell them to go to hell, Zena summarized, standing up. Think about it, okay? That evening, sitting in my small rental apartment on the outskirts of Oxnard, I stared at a framed photograph, the only family photo I kept of myself. I'm 12 in it. Willow is 15. She's smiling at the camera, tall and slender, with perfect blonde hair gathered in a ponytail. I stand a little to the side, slouching as if trying to become invisible. My mother has her hand on Willow's shoulder. My father is standing behind both of us, but his gaze is only on his older daughter. Next time, let's not use Freya. She always ruins the pictures, Mother said then, looking through the pictures. Look, here you blinked, and here there's a grimace. Can't you look normal sometimes? I felt like smashing that frame, throwing the picture away, erasing all the memories. But instead, I opened my laptop and wrote back, I'll be at Christmas dinner. I'll bring blueberry pie. As I sent the email, I felt a familiar heaviness in my chest. I would fall into the same trap again. I'd go with the hope that this time would be different, and I'd come back with another batch of pain and disappointment. But something kept me from breaking the cycle, a mixture of duty, habit, and the foolish hope that one day they would see something of value in me. The phone rang, snapping me out of my musings. Zena's name popped up on the screen. You answered it, didn't you? She asked at once. I can hear it in your voice. How do you know? Because I know you better than you know yourself, she sighed. Freya, be honest. Do you really want to go? Or are you just afraid of disappointing them? I'd been silent for too long, and that was more eloquent than any answer. You're going to have to choose yourself someday, Zena said quietly. I hope you do it before they destroy the last shreds of your self-confidence. After the call, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the lights of Oxnard. The city was living its life. People coming home, cooking dinner, laughing with loved ones. Normal families. Without the constant comparisons. Without the humiliation. Without the pain of every word. I imagined the upcoming Christmas. My mother would question me about the promotion that never happened, and invariably compare me to Willow's success. Dad would drink too much and start grumbling about my odd career choice. Willow would smile indulgently, playing the caring big sister, but never miss an opportunity to talk about her new car or her trip to Europe. And I'll sit with a strained smile, counting the minutes until release. Maybe Zena's right. Maybe it's time to end this endless cycle of pain and frustration. But even with these thoughts, I knew I would go. Because somewhere deep inside, there was still a little girl who desperately wanted to be loved simply for existing. The week before Christmas was surprisingly busy. I'd been assigned an urgent inspection of the water system for a new apartment complex, and every day I'd come home exhausted. But strangely enough, I was grateful for the busyness. Less time to think about the upcoming family holiday. On Friday evening, 7 days before Christmas, I stopped at the mall. I needed to buy gifts for my family, an annual ritual that always gave me mixed feelings. Every year, I spent an inordinate amount of time choosing the perfect gifts that I hoped would finally elicit genuine joy from my parents and sister. And every year I saw the barely concealed disappointment in their eyes. At the electronics store, I spent a long time choosing wireless headphones for my father. He liked to listen to old jazz records in his study. For my mother, I bought an expensive French perfume that I knew she'd like, but she'd never admit it. And Willow. For her, I'd chosen an elegant leather day planner with her initials. She'd always been organized to the point of pedantry. On my way out of the mall, I spotted a small jewelry store and, on impulse, bought a silver bracelet for Elma's grandmother. Despite her barbed remarks, Grandma was the only one in the family who at least sometimes took my side. At home, I carefully wrapped the gifts and decided to take them to my parents ahead of time. Usually, I arrived at the last minute, just before dinner, to minimize time with my family. But this time I thought I could leave the presents and leave quietly, avoiding awkward conversations about my unsettled life. My parents' house was in the old part of Oxnard, a two-story house with an immaculately tended garden that my mother was almost more proud of than her own daughters. I parked in the driveway and was surprised to see Willow's car. My sister usually only came for the holiday itself, flying in from San Francisco. It was about 6 in the evening, lights on in a few windows. I grabbed the bag of gifts and walked to the front door. As I was about to ring the bell, I heard voices coming from the living room, which overlooked the side terrace. The window was ajar, and I could hear my mother's voice clearly. "It's done, Waldron. We'll announce it at Christmas dinner." Curiosity got the better of me, and instead of calling, I walked cautiously around the house and stopped under the parlor window. Through the gap between the curtains, I could see my mother sitting in her favorite armchair, my father with his usual glass of whiskey, and Willow walking around the room with a glass of wine. "I don't see why we have to wait until Christmas," Willow said. "You could just call her and tell her." "Because I want the whole family to witness it." Her mother pressed her lips together. "So she can't twist it around and make us look like villains." "What are you talking about?" Father asked, and I realized he was already pretty drunk. "About Mother's house, Waldron," Mother said irritably. "That we've decided to sell it." I felt my heart skip a beat. Grandmother's house. The little cottage by the lake that Grandma Elma had promised to leave me. The one thing in this family that was supposed to go to me, not Willow. "What about Freya?" Dad asked, and for a moment I could hear something like concern in his voice. "Mom promised her this house." Mother snorted. Promises could be broken, especially if they were made under duress. Mom just felt guilty to Freya for always preferring Willow. "This house is in a good location. Prices have gone up there. It's silly to leave it to Freya. She won't be able to maintain it on her salary anyway. We'll sell it and invest the money in expanding Willow's business." "That makes sense," Willow seconded. "I'm starting a second accounting firm, and I need the investment. What's Freya going to do with the house? Will she go there on weekends and complain about life?" They laughed, and the laughter was like a punch in the face. I gripped the gift bag tighter, feeling my insides grow cold. "It's cruel," my father said suddenly, "to announce it in front of everyone." "Oh, come on, Waldron," her mother said. "It's high time you showed Free where she belongs. She's always been a burden, always dissatisfied, unsuccessful, unhappy. Willow's our real daughter. She's lived up to all our expectations. And Freya just exists." I felt nausea rising in my throat. The curtains weren't fully drawn, and I could see Willow smiling, clearly pleased with her mother's words. "It's better for everyone," Willow said. "After this Christmas, we can finally stop pretending that we're a happy family. Freya will realize that she doesn't belong here." "She's always been too sensitive." Mother shook her head. "Remember how she cried when we put Willow in music school and they told her she had no hearing? Or when you said her prom dress made her look like a barrel of herrings?" Willow laughed. "I hope she doesn't throw a tantrum at Christmas," her mother sighed. "You know, sometimes I think it would have been better if we'd settled on one child." "Delia!" Father exclaimed, and I thought even he seemed shocked by the words. "What?" asked the mother innocently. "You yourself keep saying that you don't understand how we could have raised such different daughters." "Yes, but—" The father hesitated, obviously unable to find an argument. "Let's get to the point," Willow interrupted. "When do we put the house on the market? Right after Christmas?" "I already talked to the realtor," Willow nodded. "He said January was a good time. Not much competition in the market." "And if Freya objects?" Father asked. "What can she do?" Mother shrugged her shoulders. "Mom technically owns the house, and she promised to sign it over to me 5 years ago. We just decided not to tell Freya yet, so as not to upset her too much." "5 years ago?" I whispered, not believing my ears. They'd known all along that the house would never be mine. "Anyway," my mother continued, "it's time to end this charity work. Freya should finally grow up and stop expecting someone to solve her problems. If she can't afford her own place on her salary, that's her problem, not ours." "I agree," Willow nodded. "At her age, I was already running my own company, and she's still playing with pipes and sewers." "She's a water inspector," Dad corrected. "What's the difference?" Willow waved her hand. "A job for losers with no ambition." I stood there, unable to move, feeling their every word sinking into me like a sharp blade. The gift bag suddenly seemed so ridiculous, so pointless. I'd spent almost $200 on people who secretly planned to humiliate me and throw me out of their lives. You know what? My father suddenly said, and his voice sounded unaccustomedly firm. I don't like this. Freya may not be as successful as you, Willow, but she's a good person, and she deserves to be treated better. There was silence in the room for a moment, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Would my father take my side for the first time? Oh, Waldron, my mother sighed theatrically. You're at it again. Remember what happened the last time you defended her? She decided she could ignore our advice, and look where she is now, 33 years old, no career, no personal life, a rented apartment, and a job that any college graduate could do. I'm just saying we could have done it differently, Dad said stubbornly. Not at Christmas, not in front of everyone. And missed the chance to finally show her who she really is? Mother shook her head. No, time to end this comedy. After Christmas, Freya will finally realize that she's no longer a part of this family. I didn't listen any further. Carefully backing away from the window, I made my way to the car, trying to move quietly. I left the bag of gifts by the garden bench, letting the rain and wind decide their fate. When I got behind the wheel, I didn't start the car right away. My hands were shaking and my chest felt heavy, as if a huge stone had been placed there. I knew that my parents, especially my mother, had always preferred Willow, knew I was a disappointment to them. But to hear them openly discuss a plan to banish me from the family, a plan designed for maximum public humiliation, it was too much even for me. Grandmother's house. The small, cozy cottage by the lake where I'd spent the best moments of my childhood. The only place where I felt safe. Grandma had promised it to me on my 25th birthday. At least something should go to you, not your sister, she said then. And all this time they knew it was a lie. I started the car and slowly pulled into the driveway, hoping no one would hear the noise of the engine. My mother's words rang in my head. Freya just exists. She's always been a burden. After Christmas, Freya will finally realize she's no longer a part of this family. They weren't just planning to deprive me of my grandmother's house. They planned to strip me of the last illusions that I had ever been a part of this family, and to do it publicly, in front of all the relatives, to humiliate me as much as possible. The drive home was a blur. I didn't remember how I got to my apartment, how I got up the stairs, how I opened the door. I only woke up when I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my coat and boots. Betrayal. That's what I felt. A deep, all-encompassing betrayal. Not just because of the house, but because of my entire life spent trying to earn the love of people who were never capable of giving it. I spent the next 2 days in a daze. I couldn't eat, could barely sleep, and barely spoke at work. My colleagues wrote off my condition as pre-holiday stress, and I didn't try to dissuade them. Only Zena looked at me anxiously, but I avoided her questions, not ready to tell her what had happened. On Sunday night, lying on the couch and mindlessly switching channels, I finally felt the numbness give way to rage. Pure, uncontaminated rage at a family that had never considered me theirs, and at myself for years of fruitlessly trying to earn their approval. I stood up and paced the small living room, trying to calm the storm inside. On the table was the Christmas issue of the local newspaper, with the headline, "Time to be with Family." I crumpled it up and tossed it into the corner. The phone rang. My mother's name popped up on the screen, and I felt nausea rise to my throat. For the first time in my life, I deliberately rejected her call. A minute later, the message came back. "Why aren't you answering? You confirmed you'll be at Christmas. We need to discuss the menu." The menu? They're planning my public humiliation and banishment from the family, and yet they want to discuss the menu? I looked at my phone, contemplating what to reply, but all words seemed inadequate. In the end, I simply texted, "Busy. Talk to you later," and turned off the notifications. Stepping out onto the small balcony, I took a deep breath of the cool evening air. Oxnard lay before me, lit up with Christmas lights and lanterns. The city I'd lived in all my life, never going farther than a couple days. The city I'd chosen not because I loved it, but because my family lived here. Family. A word that always evoked a mixture of hope and pain in me. All my life, I had built it around the concept of duty. I owed my parents, had to live up to their expectations, had to be there for them, had to put up with their neglect. What did they owe me? Love, respect, support. I remembered a conversation 3 months ago with Brent Calloway, head of the Portland Water Department. He was attending a conference in Oxnard and was impressed with my presentation on implementing a new water quality monitoring system. "We have an opening for a deputy department head," he said over coffee after the conference. "With your experience and approach, you would be ideal, Ms. Hambleton." I remember freezing, holding the cup halfway to my lips. "It's, this is very sudden," I mumbled. "But not unpleasant, I hope?" He smiled. "The salary is double what you're making now, plus bonuses and the opportunity to do your own research. We have a great team, and I can't move," I interrupted him. "My family's here in Oxnard." He looked at me with slight surprise but didn't insist. "I understand. Family is important. But if you change your mind, the offer still stands for at least another month. Here's my card." I kept his card, sometimes taking it out of my wallet and looking at the Portland department logo, imagining the life I could have. A new city, new opportunities, new people. A life without the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough. But each time I put the card back, convincing myself that I couldn't leave my family. A family that had just proven that I was nothing to them. I went back to the apartment and started going through my bag. The business card had to be in here somewhere. Here it was, a little crumpled, but with the phone number clearly visible. I looked at my watch. It was almost 11 p.m., too late to call. But the post office was open 24 hours a day. I wrote a brief but polite letter, asking if the offer was still valid, and if so, when I could start work. As I sent it, I felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. What am I doing? Am I really ready to drop everything and leave? But is there anything left here worth holding on to? In the morning, I was awakened by the phone ringing, an unfamiliar number with a Portland area code. "Freya Hambleton," I answered, trying to sound professional despite my sleep-deprived voice. "Ms. Hambleton, this is Brent Calloway," came a cheerful voice. "I got your letter and thought I'd call right away so I wouldn't keep you in the dark. Yes, the position is still open and we'd love to have you on our team." "Really?" I sat up on the bed, fully awake. "But it's been 3 months. And in that time, we've had dozens of interviews, but we still haven't found the right candidate." He grinned. "The universe clearly wants it to be you. When could you start?" I hesitated. My mind flashed back to Christmas dinner, to the faces of my relatives watching my humiliation, to the gloating look on my mother's face. "What about January?" I asked. "Say, from the 3rd of the month?" "That would be great," he agreed. "I'll send you all the details in the mail. We'll need a few documents, and of course, you'll need to find a place to live." "I'll be fine," I said confidently. "Thank you for this chance, Mr. Calloway." "Brent, please," he corrected me. "And I'm the one who should be thanking you. Happy holidays, Freya. I'll see you in the new year." When I finished talking, I sat still for a few minutes, realizing what had happened. I've accepted a job offer in another city. I'm going to leave Oxnard. I'm going to sever all ties with a family that was never truly mine. I felt strangely light, as if I'd dropped an invisible weight I'd been dragging around all my life. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe fully. At work, I went straight to my boss with a letter of resignation. Jeff Olson, an older man with a perpetually tired look, looked at me over his glasses with genuine surprise. "Dismissal? You?" He shook his head. "Freya, you're one of the best inspectors in the department. May I ask the reason?" "I was offered the position of Deputy Chief of Department in Portland," I answered. And for the first time, the words I'd spoken aloud filled me with pride. "Wow," Jeff whistled. "That's quite a promotion. Well, I can't keep you, but it's going to be hard to find a replacement." "I'll work for 2 weeks and get all the current projects ready for handover," I promised. "Deal." He signed the application. "Congratulations, Freya. You've earned it." As I walked out of his office, I ran into Zena, who was clearly eavesdropping by the door. "Portland?" she hissed, dragging me into the break room. "You're going to Portland and you didn't tell me anything?" "It was a spontaneous decision. I felt a prick of guilt. I'm sorry, Zena. I was going to tell you. What happened? She looked at me carefully. You've been walking around like a drowning man for the last few days, and now you've suddenly decided to drop everything and leave? I took a deep breath and told her everything about the conversation I'd overheard, about my family's plans to humiliate me at Christmas, about my decision to accept the job offer in Portland. Bastards, Zena whispered when I was done. What bastards? I'm sorry, Freya, but your family are toxic monsters. I know, I nodded. I'd always known, I just didn't want to admit it. And you're right to leave, Zena hugged me tightly. I'll miss you though, damn it. I'll miss you too. I felt tears come to my eyes. You're the only person in Oxnard I'm going to miss. Hey, don't be sad. She pulled away and looked into my eyes. It's not the end of the world. Portland's not on another planet, just a couple hours away. I'll come to you and you'll come to me, and we'll call each other every day. Promise? I swear on my vinyl collection, she said seriously. Now tell me more about this job. Deputy chief? Really? That's a huge promotion. The rest of the day was hectic as I finished reports, handed projects to coworkers, and answered questions from surprised coworkers about my sudden decision to leave. No one could believe that I, Freya Hambleton, who had never been one for change, had suddenly decided to change everything. That evening, I began to make a list of things to do before I left. Find a place to live in Portland, break my lease in Oxnard, pack my things, arrange for transportation, and deciding what to do about Christmas dinner. I could have just not gone. I could have said I was sick, I had a work emergency, any excuse I could think of. But part of me wanted to see their faces when they realized their plan had failed, that I knew their betrayal, and that I wouldn't let them control my life anymore. The phone rang again. My mother. This time I answered it. Freya, finally! Her voice was irritated as usual. I've called you 3 times. Why didn't you answer? I've been busy, I answered dryly. How could you be busy enough to ignore your mother's calls? She snorted. Anyway, I'm calling to remind you that you promised to bring blueberry pie for Christmas. And please try not to overdry it this time like last year. I closed my eyes, feeling the old pain mingle with a new resolve. Don't worry about the pie, Mom. What's that supposed to mean? You're not going to bake it? There's a hint of anger in her voice. Freya, we've got it all planned out. You can't just... I said, don't worry about it. I interrupted her. I'll see you at Christmas. I hung up the phone, feeling oddly satisfied. A small act of defiance, but it was a fresh start for me. The next day, I took the day off work and began preparing to leave. The first thing I did was call my landlord and explain the situation. Mr. Ramirez was understanding and agreed to terminate the contract without penalty, considering I had been the perfect tenant for 5 years. I then contacted a real estate agent in Portland and arranged to view several apartments via video link. Surprisingly, the process was easier than I expected. By evening, I had a tentative agreement to rent a small but cozy apartment not far from my future place of employment. Zena came over after work with a bottle of wine and helped me start sorting things. It was surprising how few truly important items I had accumulated over the years of living in Oxnard. I decided to keep most of the furniture. It would be easier to buy new ones in Portland than to arrange transportation. You know, Zena said, pouring wine into glasses, I always knew you'd get out of here someday. I just didn't think it would be so sudden. Neither did I admitted. But now I realize I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. The moment when I'd finally stop trying to live up to the expectations of people who didn't care about me. To the new Freya, Zena raised her glass. Bold, free, and ready to start a life without toxic shit. To a new life, I smiled, clinking my glass with hers. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without nightmares, without anxious thoughts, without feeling like I wasn't good enough. I just slept, calm and deep, knowing I was making the right decision. The next few days passed in preparation for departure. I sorted through my belongings, packing the essentials, giving the rest to charity or throwing it away. With each thing I got rid of, I felt lighter, freer. My mother called a few more times with questions about Christmas, and each time I answered evasively, not revealing my plans. Part of me still wanted to show up for dinner, just to see the look on their faces when I told them I knew their plan and that I was leaving for good. But the other part realized that it would just be another form of fighting for their attention. The train ticket to Portland was bought for December 24th, Christmas Eve. I decided it was symbolic to start a new life on a day that is usually associated with family and home. Only now my home would be wherever I chose to make it, not where I was never truly welcomed. The morning of December 24th was surprisingly clear. The sun peeked into the nearly empty apartment, illuminating the rectangles on the walls where the paintings used to hang. I sat on the windowsill with a cup of coffee, looking around the space I'd called home for 7 years. Now it seemed alien and impersonal, like a hotel room before I left. 2 large suitcases and a backpack were all I had decided to take with me into my new life. It's amazing how few really important things accumulate over the years. Photo albums, a few books, a favorite mug given by Zena for her 30th birthday, comfortable clothes, a laptop, documents. The rest had either already been mailed to Portland, given away, or thrown away. My train was leaving at 14:30. I still had a few hours left to say goodbye to a city I'd never really loved, but had grown accustomed to considering mine. I decided to walk along the waterfront, the one place in Oxnard I would remember fondly. My phone buzzed briefly, another message from my mother. Freya, you have to be here by 5. Don't be late as usual. And don't forget the pie. I didn't answer. There had been a dozen such messages in the last few days, and they all went unanswered. Let them suffer the unknown. Let them feel a drop of the anxiety I'd lived with all my life trying to please them. I left the house and walked slowly toward the ocean. December. Oxnard was unusually quiet. Most people had already left for their families or were preparing for the holidays at home. There was almost no one on the waterfront, only a couple of elderly men fishing and a young woman walking her golden retriever. The sound of the surf always calmed me down. As a child, when it became unbearable at home, I would run out here and sit on the rocks for hours, looking at the waves. No one here compared me to Willow. No one reminded me of my shortcomings. No one made me feel superfluous. I remember getting a B in algebra when I was 14, the only non-A in the quarter. My mother looked at the report card like I'd committed a crime. Willow never brought in B's, she said then. Not even in elementary school. But I tried to explain. That teacher's really strict. Only 3 people in the class got A's and… The foster's daughter got an A, my mother interrupted. Apparently, she tried harder. I remember running out to the boardwalk and crying all night until my father found me. He sat down next to me, patted me awkwardly on the shoulder and said, "Don't take it personally, Freya. Your mother just wants you to be a better person." Better than what? I asked then. He didn't answer. Just took me home, where my mother didn't even notice my absence. She was too busy admiring Willow's new school project. And now I was standing here again, at the water's edge. But I felt not despair, but a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I wasn't so much saying goodbye to the city as I was saying goodbye to my old self. The Freya who'd always put the needs of others before her own, who'd sought approval from people who couldn't give it. Back at the apartment, I made one last round, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything important. In the mailbox, I found an envelope, a Christmas card from a neighbor, an elderly Mrs. Jenkins. "Merry Christmas, dear. You deserve all the best," read the inscription inside. This simple wish card from a woman I barely knew somehow touched me more than all the insincere family holiday celebrations of recent years. At 13 o'clock, Zena arrived to take me to the station. She helped load my suitcases into the car and hugged me tightly. "I still can't believe you're leaving," she said, pulling away. "Oxnard will be so much more boring without you." "I can't believe I'm doing this," I said honestly. "I've been afraid of change my whole life, and now I'm changing all at once." It took 20 minutes to get to the station. We didn't talk much. Each of us was immersed in her own thoughts. Only when Zena parked, she turned to me and said seriously, "Promise me you won't let them get in your head again. Not your mother, not your father, not that bitch Willow. You deserve better, Freya. You always have." "I promise." I nodded, feeling tears come to my eyes. It wasn't crowded on the platform, a few students with backpacks, a family with a small child, a couple of elderly tourists. I checked my luggage and went back to Zena, who waited until the train arrived. "Are you sure you don't want to go to them first?" she asked. "To tell them what you think?" "I'm sure," I said firmly. I'd already wasted too much energy trying to prove something to them. I won't do it again. The train arrived right on schedule. One last hug with Zena. One last promise to call every day. One last promise to wave to each other via video chat. And then I was sitting at the window, watching the platform slowly drift backward. Oxnard was left behind, as was my entire former life. The trip to Portland was going to take about 18 hours with a layover in Sacramento. I made myself comfortable and pulled out a book, but I couldn't concentrate on reading. My thoughts kept returning to my family, to their reaction when they realized I wouldn't be coming to Christmas dinner, that I would disappear from their lives altogether. Outside the window, the suburbs of Oxnard floated by, replaced by fields and hills. I remembered the train ride to my aunt's house in San Diego when I was a kid. I was about 8 years old, and I was so excited about the trip that I couldn't sit still. Willow, who was 11 at the time, sat with a book and defiantly ignored me. "Mommy, Freya's annoying," she finally said. "Move her somewhere else." My mother sighed and told me to sit next to my father, who was dozing by the window. I remember the feeling of rejection and not understanding what I had done wrong. Now, looking at this memory with adult eyes, I saw a selfish girl who had been taught by her parents to believe that her comfort was more important than her sister's feelings. At 7 p.m., my phone started ringing. My mother's name popped up on the screen. I dismissed the call. A minute later, the message came back. "Where are you? Everyone's already gathered." I didn't answer. The train arrived in Sacramento around 9 p.m. I had an hour layover, so I decided to have dinner at a small cafe in the train station. While I was waiting to order, the phone rang again. This time, my father. "Freya!" His voice sounded strangely sober. "Where are you? Mom's freaking out." "I left, Dad," I answered calmly. "Gone how? Where?" He sounded genuinely puzzled. "You promised you'd be at dinner." "Tell Mom I won't be here. Not tonight, not at Christmas, not ever." "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" The irritation was starting to creep into his voice. "We're having a family dinner. Everyone's here. Even your grandmother's here. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted him. "And I'm doing it. Goodbye, Dad." I hung up the phone, feeling strangely light. For the first time in my life, I was deciding what was best for me, without having to think about their expectations and demands. The transfer went smoothly, and soon I was on the overnight train north toward Portland. The neighboring seat was still vacant, which was fortunate. I could stretch my legs and try to get some sleep. Around 11 p.m., messages from Willow started coming in. First annoyed, then downright angry. "You've always been selfish. Mom's crying because of you. You ruined everyone's holiday." I turned off the notifications and put my phone away. Their manipulations no longer worked on me. I stared out the dark window, where my face was reflected, and suddenly caught myself smiling. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing the right thing. Not for them, but for myself. The night on the train was restless. I fell into a light slumber or woke up from every noise. But even fatigue could not interrupt the feeling of freedom, which became stronger with each kilometer. In the morning, as the first rays of sunlight colored the sky pink, I pulled out my phone and saw 27 missed calls and 32 texts. My mother, my father, Willow, even my grandmother was trying to reach me. But there was one call that stood out among the rest, Brent Calloway. He left a voicemail message, wishing me a Merry Christmas and letting me know he'd found temporary housing for me if I hadn't decided on an apartment yet. His concern, completely selfless and asking for nothing in return, amazed me. That's how normal people treat people, without trying to manipulate and control. I dialed his number and thanked him for his help, told him I already had an agreement on the apartment, but appreciated his concern. We talked for a few more minutes about how I would settle in when I got there and my first few days of work. After the conversation, I felt even better. I knew for sure I was going to the right place. Around 12 in the afternoon, the phone rang again. Mother. In any other situation, I would have ignored the call, but now I decided to answer it. I was far enough away, physically and emotionally, that her words could no longer hurt me. "Where are you?" Her voice sounded cold and demanding, without the slightest concern. I felt my lips stretch into a smile of their own. So many times she'd asked that question, and each time I dutifully reported back, fearing her displeasure. But not today. "Far away, Mom," I answered, and getting farther by the minute. "What's with the childish antics, Freya?" There was a familiar note of irritation in her voice. "You've ruined the whole family's holiday. Grandma's upset. Aunt Martha's disappointed." "Don't wait up for me," I interrupted her. "Not tonight, not ever." "What's this nonsense? You have to be here. We're your family." I laughed softly, feeling the last chains that bound me to their toxic world break one by one. "No, Mom, you are not my family. Family doesn't plan how to publicly humiliate one of its members. A family doesn't get excited thinking about how they're going to deprive their daughter of a promised inheritance. The family doesn't say, 'It would be better if we stopped at one child.'" There was silence on the phone. I could almost physically feel her frantically thinking, trying to figure out how I knew this. "I don't know what you mean," she finally said. "Yes, you do, Mom. I heard everything. A week ago, when I came to drop off the presents, I stood under the living room window while you and Dad and Willow discussed how you were going to announce the sale of Grandma's house at Christmas dinner to show me where I belonged, so I could finally realize I'm not part of the family anymore." "Freya, you've got it all wrong." Her voice shook. "We were just worried that you wouldn't be able to keep the house. It was in good faith." "Stop lying." My voice remained calm. "I heard everything. About how you think I'm a burden. About how you wish you'd stopped at one child. About how you were planning on investing the money from the house sale in Willow's business." "You were eavesdropping?" The indignation in her voice was almost comical. "How could you? These are private conversations. How could you plan something like that?" I parried. "It doesn't matter anymore, though. I'm accepting the job offer in Portland that I turned down 3 months ago, thinking I should stay close to my family. I realize now that you never needed me. So don't wait up for me. Not ever again." "You can't just pick up and leave." Her voice rose to a shout. "You're part of this family. You have responsibilities to us." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I have no responsibilities to people who never really loved me. Goodbye." I ended the call and turned the phone off, feeling strangely calm. The train rushed through snow-covered fields and forests, taking me farther and farther away from the past, toward the new life I had chosen for myself. Portland greeted me with a fine drizzle and a cool breeze. As I stepped off the train, I shivered, wrapping myself tighter in my coat. It felt different in December than it did in sunny Oxnard. But even the gray skies and chilly weather couldn't spoil the feeling of a new beginning. Brent Calloway was waiting for me at the station, a tall man with graying dark hair and an attentive gaze. He waved hello when he spotted me in the crowd of passengers. "Welcome to Portland, Freya," he smiled, helping me with my suitcases. "How was your trip?" "Long but productive," I replied. "Thank you for meeting me on Christmas Day. I'm sure you had other plans." "Nothing much," he shrugged, heading for the exit. His daughter wouldn't be arriving until tomorrow, and meeting the new deputy was more important than watching Christmas movies alone. The first weeks in Portland were hectic with settling in and adjusting to the new job. I completely immersed myself in the new life, trying not to think about the past. But it came back to me in mid-January when I got a call from Grandma Elma, the only family member whose number I hadn't blocked. "Freya, is that you?" She sounded tired but determined. "I finally got through. Where are you, girl?" "In Portland, Grandma." I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling unexpected excitement. "I have a new job here." "That's what I thought," she hummed. "Good for you for running away from those hyenas. It was about time." I blinked in surprise. Grandma had never openly criticized my mother and Willow, though she wasn't as cruel to me as they were. "Grandma, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm dying, Freya," she said simply without drama. "The doctors give me a month, maybe 2, and I need to take care of some things while I still can." Her words struck like lightning. I knew my grandmother was already 78, but she always seemed so strong, so eternal. What's wrong? I asked quietly. Cancer, terminal. Found out too late, she said as casually as if she were talking about the weather. But that's not what I'm calling about. I need you to come over. Just for a little while, just for a day or two. There's a conversation I can't have over the phone. Sure, Grandma. I didn't hesitate for a second. Just tell me when, and I'll be there. This Friday. And don't tell anyone you're coming, especially your mother. She hung up without waiting for an answer, and I was left sitting with the phone in my hand, trying to make sense of the conversation. Grandma's dying. She wants to see me, and it has to remain a secret from the rest of the family. Friday morning, I flew to Oxnard, taking 2 days off work. Brent was understanding, though I didn't go into detail, just saying it was a family emergency. Grandma lived in a small cottage by the lake, about 20 minutes from town. It was an old but well-maintained house with a green roof and a veranda wreathed in ivy. A place where I had always felt relatively safe, the one piece of childhood that evoked warm memories. I rented a car at the airport and arrived at my grandmother's house around 3 in the afternoon. She was sitting on the veranda in an old rocking chair, covered in plaid despite the warm weather for January. I noticed at once how much she had changed. She had lost weight, her skin had turned a grayish shade, but her eyes were still sharp and lively. Don't just stand there, come in, she commanded when she saw me. There's tea in the kitchen, pour it for you and me. I obediently went into the house, so familiar and dear. Nothing had changed, the same worn rugs on the floor, the same pictures on the walls, the same smell of ginger cookies and lavender. I poured tea into the old china cups and returned to the veranda. You look good, Grandma said, studying me closely. Free. Portland is clearly doing you good. Thank you. I sat down next to her. Grandma, what's going on? Why the secrecy? She sipped her tea as if gathering her thoughts, and then she spoke quietly but firmly. I always knew Delia was unfair to you. I've always seen her elevate Willow and belittle you. But I was too cowardly to really get involved. Afraid of losing touch with my only daughter and granddaughters. She shook her head. Cowardice is the worst sin for an old man. There's no time to correct mistakes. You don't have to. Listen to me, she interrupted me. When you were little, I promised you this house. Remember? Said you should have something, not your sister. And I kept that promise, Freya. 5 years ago, I signed the house over to you. I froze, not believing my ears. But, I heard Mom say that you promised to sign the house over to her. That they were going to sell it and… Delia always thought she was entitled to everything. Grandma grinned bitterly. She thought I signed the house over to her because I let her think that. But the deeds are in your name, Freya. This house is yours, and the land around it, and the bank account tied to it. An account? I couldn't believe what was happening. I sold my company stock 2 years ago when I realized your mother would never change. I put the money in a trust fund. It's enough to support the house and your education if you want to continue studying. I sat stunned by her words. The house they had talked about at the family council, planning to announce its sale at Christmas. The house they thought was their mother's. Was always really mine? Why didn't you tell me before? I asked quietly. I was afraid Delia would find out and find a way to manipulate you or contest the will. Grandma sighed. She's very persistent when it comes to money, and I wanted you to have the choice to stay or go. A free choice, not dictated by guilt or duty. She pulled an envelope out of her robe pocket and handed it to me. Here are all the papers. The house is already yours. You don't have to wait for me to die. I made the deed 5 years ago. I just didn't tell anyone. Not even you. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry for the secrecy. I was trying to protect you the only way I knew how. I opened the envelope. Inside were the deed to the house, bank statements with a six-figure sum, keys, and a letter from a lawyer confirming that everything was legitimate. Grandma, I don't know what to say. Tell her you'll be happy, she said simply. That you won't let them push you around anymore. That you'll live your life by your own rules. But when they find out… Oh, they already know. Grandma suddenly smiled slyly. I told Delia yesterday. She rushed down here with her lawyer demanding to see the will. I have to admit, it was quite an impressive performance. I pictured my mother's face when she learned the truth. and I couldn't hold back a nervous chuckle. So what now? Now you decide, Grandma shrugged. You can sell the house and never come back to Oxnard. You can rent it out and earn extra income. You can come here on weekends. It's your house, Freya. Do what you want with it. We talked till late afternoon. Grandma told me how her mother had tried to pressure her over the last few years, how Willow had come over with ostentatious attention, how they'd planned to sell the house, thinking it was already theirs, and how she'd kept quiet all this time, knowing the real documents were in her lawyer's safe. Stay the night, she said when it got dark. Your room is just as it was. I went up to the second floor to the small bedroom where I spent my summer vacations as a child. Indeed, nothing had changed here. The same floral wallpaper, the same old bookcase, the same narrow bed by the window. I lay looking at the stars through the glass and felt a strange mixture of sadness and peace. In the morning, I was awakened by a noise downstairs. Loud voices, a door slamming. I came downstairs and saw my mother standing in the middle of the living room, pale with rage, clutching some papers in her hands. You! She turned to me, her eyes widening with anger. You planned the whole thing! You manipulated your mother to get the house! Grandma sat in her chair, watching the scene with a nonchalant look. Good morning, Delia, she said calmly. As you can see, Freya has come to visit me, to her house. It's not her house. Her mother threw the papers on the floor. You promised it to me. We were planning to sell it to expand Willow's business. We already have a buyer. Unfortunately, there's nothing to sell. Grandma shrugged. The house belongs to Fry. It has been for 5 years now. I looked at my mother, and for the first time I didn't feel afraid of her anger. Only tiredness and something akin to pity. I never planned to take the house, I said quietly. I didn't even know it was mine until Grandma told me yesterday. You were the one who planned to take it from me, even though you promised it would be mine. Don't you dare accuse me, Mother raised her voice. After all we've done for you, after all the sacrifices, and this is how you repay us, running off like a thief, ruining Christmas, embarrassing us in front of the whole family, and now this. I think you'd better go, Delia, said Grandmother calmly. You're upsetting me, and the doctors say I need to take care of my nerves. I'm going to sue. Her mother turned to her. I'll prove that you were incapacitated when you signed those papers, that she forced you to. You can try, the grandmother smiled, but there was no warmth in her smile. All the documents are in perfect order, notarized by a notary and my lawyer, and medical certificates about my mental health at the time of signing are on file too. But if you want to spend money on a knowingly losing trial, that's your right. My mother stood there breathing heavily, shifting her gaze from me to my grandmother and back again. Then she turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard that the glass rattled. Well, now she won't be bothering me with her visits, Grandma sighed with relief. That's a relief. I laughed, feeling strangely light. For the first time, I saw my mother for what she was. Not the formidable figure from my childhood, but just an angry, selfish woman who wasn't used to rejection. What are you going to do with the house? Grandma asked me after breakfast. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But I certainly won't sell it. Too many memories. Good memories? The only good ones, I smiled at her. They all have to do with this house. You. I returned to Portland feeling like I'd closed a circle. The story about the house, which the family had planned to use to humiliate me, had turned out to be their own defeat. Justice had been served in the most unexpected way. 3 weeks later, Grandma called to say that Willow had tried to convince her to change her mind, offering care and attention in exchange for a new will. I told her it was too late, Grandma grinned, and that I didn't need fake care from a man who visited me once a year at Christmas. In early March, Grandma died, quietly, in her sleep. I flew to the funeral and saw the whole family for the first time in a long time. Mother looked gaunt and angry. Willow looked disgruntled and irritated. The father just seemed lost. None of them approached me at the cemetery like I was a stranger. After the funeral, my grandmother's lawyer came up to me with one last letter from her. I'm proud of you, Freya, she wrote. You found the strength to break out of the cage they built for you. Live freely and happily. And remember that a true home is not walls, but a place where you can be yourself. Back in Portland, I decided to rent out my grandmother's house to a nice family with children so that it could once again be filled with laughter and create new, happy memories. And I immersed myself in working and settling into my new life. Spring in Portland turned out to be amazingly beautiful. The city bloomed, filled with greenery and flowers. I bought a bicycle and often rode to work along the scenic route along the river. On weekends, I explored new neighborhoods, found my favorite coffee shops and bookstores, and enrolled in photography courses, a hobby I had long dreamed of but had always put off. Zena came for a weekend in April, and we spent 3 wonderful days exploring the city and talking the night away, just like old times. She was thrilled with the changes in my life and the story of the house. "There is justice," she said when I told her the whole story. "I only wish Grandma had told you sooner. You could have left without going through that humiliation at Christmas." "It happened exactly the way it was supposed to." I shook my head. "If it hadn't been for that overheard conversation, I never would have had the courage to leave. I never would have known what I was capable of without their constant judgment." In May, I received a letter from my mother, an official letter sent through a lawyer. She was demanding a portion of the inheritance, claiming that as a daughter she was entitled to a share of the estate. My grandmother's lawyer assured me that there was nothing to worry about. All the documents were in order, and the court, if it came to it, would be on my side. "She won't settle down," he said. "It's hard for people like that to accept that they won't get what they think is rightfully theirs." I replied through my lawyer that I had no intention of selling the house or sharing my inheritance. That was the end of communication with the family. Only my father called occasionally, always briefly, always discreetly, not trying to get me to reconcile with my mother or come back. These conversations didn't heal old wounds, but they created a new, healthier form of relationship, long distance, without expectations or demands. In June, I moved into a larger apartment in the same neighborhood, closer to the park. I furnished it to my own taste, without regard for other people's opinions. I put up pictures of myself on the walls, the result of the courses I was taking, which I was increasingly interested in. Colleagues who had become friends, Renata and her husband, and even Brent and his daughter came to the housewarming party. The house filled with laughter and conversation. One July evening, sitting on the balcony with a book and a cup of tea, I suddenly realized that it had been 6 months since the day I had decided to change everything. 6 months of a new life, without the constant stress and self-deprecation, without having to make excuses for every choice I made. I pulled out my phone and texted Zena. "You know, Grandma was right. A real home is not walls, but a place where you can be yourself. I finally found my home." The sun was slowly setting, coloring the Portland sky in shades of pink and gold. I looked out at the city that had become my home and felt a deep peace. The journey to this moment was long and painful, but every step was worth it. I was finally starting to write my own story, without other people's expectations or judgment. A new page of life that no one else could take away from me.